I'm excited. I've been excited about this topic for a long time because I think pastors were all kind of looking at the church and we're saying post-COVID, what does it look like to be the church with attendance and stuff like that? So that's really relevant. It hits close to home, but just the reality of why do we do this thing? Right. You know, every morning we get up and we do this ritual. Right. We could be doing other things, you know. Right. We live in this online generation now. We're living post-pandemic. Now people are familiar with things on the internet and how to connect more than they ever were. Mm-hmm. So it seems like, wow, okay, maybe it's time for us to rethink this. Or even if we don't want to rethink this, it's being rethought for us. Right. So it's like we don't really have a choice about this. And as I've kind of thought, historically speaking, I mean, there's probably some churches still around the country that still have this model, but the old model, and maybe this is the model that you were raised in, we go to church on Sunday night, we go to church on Sunday morning, we go to church on Wednesday. Man, if you're really good, maybe there's another night of the week. And so there was a shift already, right? So are we in the midst of another shift? Is that good? Is it a mixed bag? Right. I mean, what are your thoughts as you've been processing some of that?
That world has gone away. So the church world I grew up in, I even raised my kids in. Now they were pastors' kids, but still. We were at church for probably 3 or 4 hours every Sunday morning. There would be a Sunday evening Bible study at night. The kids would go to youth group or boys brigade in the middle of the week. I'd get prayer meeting on Wednesday night. You have your small group night. So probably 3-4 nights a week or times a week you might connect with your church family. That's gone. I mean, I have 4 young adult kids, all of them married, 3 of them with kids, raising families. They love Jesus. They have good experiences in church. They're not very connected to their church right now. And even before COVID, they're not doing church the way we did church. And so I kind of agonize for them and with them a little bit. And they're probably asking some of the same questions. Why do I need to do this? You know?
I mean, it was great for you for the transition because you were working 3 days a week and then you moved to 1 day. And now it's like, once a month you can show up? Is that how it works? Yeah.
So you're right. It's a really different world. And I think I realized, I saw a little blog post the other day by a church expert named Carrie Newhoff. Maybe some of you follow him. But his point was that what we're dealing with now when it comes to church is not hostility or anger, it's indifference. People just don't really care that much anymore. It just is not on their radar screen as a relevant topic. So they're not against it, but they're not for it, they're just indifferent. And his point is, that's the worst scenario of all, is for them to be indifferent. So suddenly I realized church is now a value proposition. It used to be church could be a loyalty proposition. Hey, we're all part of the church. They want me to show up. I'm going to be there because the doors are open and I believe in it. Or it was a duty proposition. This is what good Christians do. This is what my family always did, so we go out of duty. Or it was a peer pressure proposition. All our people around here go to church. My family and friends go. The culture supports church. There were all these reasons. They're all gone now. So now it's a value proposition. Is there a reason I should go? Is there something I'm going to get by going to church that I can't get any other way? And if there's not, why should I do that? I can love Jesus and read the Bible, and I have some Christian friends, so what more do I need? So it does place kind of a burden on the church, I think, to add value to people's lives. That I need that experience because my life, my relationships, my faith are better when I'm connected and engaged with this group of people.
Some people are gonna respond and they're gonna say, you know what, that sounds just like kind of this capitalistic model where if the church isn't giving me something, then and isn't that kind of scary in some ways?
It is a little scary. So if we drift towards entertaining people, then we really have ourselves mixed up. So it's not about entertaining, but it's about adding value to their lives. That there are things I find in the church experience that I can't find other places. And for me, those are three things. One is transcendence. Like most human beings have this longing to be connected to something bigger than they are. a bigger story, a great narrative, a movement, something beyond what we can. We all long for that. When you hear a good story, when you watch a good movie that just inspires or taps into some longing you have, we all desire that transcendence. I remember going to a U2 concert years ago, and you realize people were not just enjoying the music. There was a message being delivered, and people were being elevated into experiencing something bigger than they were. And they were doing what we do in worship, raising their hands, singing out loud, hugging each other. I mean, just do it in a church building, and Sunday's a worship service. And if you know, U2 has a lot of Christian roots to it. So, but anyway, people long for transcendence, and there aren't that many places to find it anymore. We specialize in transcendence. We are connected to the biggest power and the best story of all. So transcendence. The second is meaning. Why do I go to work every day? Why do I love my wife? Why do I raise my kids? Why do I pay? Why do I do anything? What's the purpose of my life beyond just survival? And the church provides people with meaning. There's a story. There's a kingdom being built, and we're part of building that kingdom. Your life matters. The way you work matters. The way you spend your money matters. The way you have fun matters. The way you love your spouse matters. Everything has meaning to it. So transcendence, meaning, and then the third thing is community. Relationships. Relationships with people who are not just like me. We all have friendships. We all have community. We're wired to have people around us, but most of us tend to drift towards people who are kind of like us. Same age, same ethnicity, same political point of view, same socioeconomic group, same sports allegiances, whatever. Community throws you in with people who are not like you and yet are a part of your life. And that brings a richness to your life. And that's hard to find outside of something like a church. When I go to church, there are people of all ages, all political parties, all ethnicities, all socioeconomic groups, and I have to learn to get along with them and love them and be enriched by them. So I feel like those are three values church adds: transcendence, meaning, and community. And we just have to deliver on those.
A couple things I thought about after we kind of had our initial conversation about this, some of the words that people might want to throw into this conversation that might not be as popular today is accountability, and maybe for some denominations, some Christian traditions, the sacraments. Let me throw those at you. What do we do with those? Because accountability can have all sorts of negative connotations in a very democratic kind of culture that we live in. But is there still something good and true and beautiful about accountability, the accountability of a local church? Especially and you made this point when we were talking about it, is that sometimes people are attending 2 to 3 churches now.
Right.
So where does that fit? Where should it fit? Is there something meaningful to recapture there?
Yeah. Accountability is an interesting word because I don't think there are many environments in which people would dare to hold one another accountable. I mean, in a church, we sort of give people permission to say, hey, John, I haven't seen you in a bunch of weeks. Or hey, I notice you and your wife, you're not sitting that close to each other anymore. Or whatever. That conversation is not likely to happen in almost any social environment. But in the church...
The internet, maybe.
Yeah, maybe. Yes. But in a church, you sort of give people permission to speak into your life and to ask you questions like that, whether it's your neighborhood Bible study or your relationship with your pastor. There just aren't many places where we give ourselves permission and give other people permission to do that with us. So that accountability is an interesting word. What was the other one?
Sacraments.
Oh, sacraments. Well, to me, that's kind of the transcendence idea.
Okay.
Here's something that we do that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Wait, put my shorts on in front of a whole group of people and get soaking wet in front of them and come up sputtering in a tank in a building Why would you do that? Well, it's because this is something that's been done for 2,000 years and has a rich history of meaning And this room is full of people who can tell you they did that, and it was a really meaningful experience for them. And they still, that's a transcendent, where else do you get to do something like that? And the same with communion. When we do that, when we share bread and cup, we're doing something that's done all over the world, in all kinds of settings, with all kinds of bread and all kinds of cups, for 2,000 years, people who say, I'm with Jesus. I'm one of his people. And that's a pretty cool thing.
It's a bit like the Pledge of Allegiance, and how that goes down over it and split over it.
Right.
It still has that
Right.
history.
Right. But this has the beauty of transcending every national barrier, every ethnic barrier, every political barrier, that we're all part of this thing that's way, way bigger than we are. And the sacrament reminds you of that. It's interesting, there's kind of a trend now in a lot of young hipster churches, all over the city, to do communion every week. A lot of us in the Baptistic evangelical tradition, we do communion once a month, because we kind of wanted to make it special. That was the idea. We didn't want to look too much like Catholics, so we do it once a month, basically. That's how it started. But a lot of younger believers are saying, I want to do this every week. In fact, one of my kids, they finally chose a church because he said, I want to do communion every week. It's a really meaningful moment for me. There's a transcendent, no one's telling me anything. I'm just doing this thing with me and God. So
Transcendence was your first word. What were the other two words again?
Meaning and community.
Meaning and community. And another kind of a contribution that comes to my mind is the verse in Hebrews 10. Don't forsake meeting with one another so that you can spur one another on towards good works. And it just kind of, I think there's a lot of meat there, right? It's like if I'm going to continue growing as a person who makes a positive impact on my world, I need to be around people who maybe expose me to my blind spots, or help me see the full orbed picture of what it looks like to be in Christ, to be like Christ. Would that fit within your...
You've got to hang around people. We get changed two ways. We get shaped primarily through either relationships or experiences. Those are things that really shape us as human beings. We can get content in our head, and content helps, truth helps. But you don't really get changed until an experience changes you or a relationship changes you. And again, that's our specialty. The church is experiences that we have together in relationship with other people. So if you're just watching at home, if you're getting all your spiritual input through a digital service and a couple of podcasts, it's kind of what my kids do, honestly. When are you with other people rubbing shoulders who are holding you accountable, who are different from who you are, and helping to shape you?
I could see somebody kind of pushing back on that and saying, look, Pastor, that's great, but you don't design the church around that. You design the church around coming to listening to some songs, hearing you tell some good stories, and then the reality is maybe I have a drink of coffee on my way out to the car, but after an hour and 10 minutes, we're ready to go home and have lunch.
Yeah, it's a good point.
Are we really doing the community
for a lot
aspect?
Of people can be as simple as, that come in on the opening hymn or a few minutes after. On the closing hymn, and it's about
10 minutes if you're from Christ Church.
So how much different is that from being at home for 50 minutes and watching it on TV? Well, there's a couple things that happen when you actually come to church. First, you have to make a decision. You're going to get up and you're going to get out. So you're going to do something different. You're going to break your routine. You're going to put some clothes on. You may not put on a tie anymore, but you're probably going to dress better than you will if you just... So you're making a statement even by putting some clothes on. I'm putting myself in a different environment. Then you're going to travel to that place, whether it's 5 minutes or 25 minutes. You're on your way. Geographically, you're moving to a new spot. Now you're settling into a space that's been dedicated and set aside for people to experience and encounter God. So now you're in that space. You're surrounded by other people who are there for the same reasons. And now you're going to be involved physically because the pastor's going to say, stand up and sing. And you're going to bow and pray. And you're going to shake hands with your neighbor. And you can sit on your couch at home and never do any of those things. You can watch other people do it, but you're not doing it. When that pastor preaches or speaks or when they're singing, you're probably going to feel some kinds of emotions. There's going to be emotions in the room. Joy, sadness, boredom, boredom, tension, you're going to feel it because you're in the room. And then when it's over, you've got to bump into some other people on your way out. No matter how fast you want to get out, you're going to have to bump into a few people on the way out. You're going to be in the car with yourself or your spouse or your family. So now you're driving home, you got a few minutes to think about what you just went through. What I'm trying to get at is your whole being, body, soul, mind, and spirit have been wrapped up in an experience that took probably an hour and a half, start to finish, and involved other people. That's more impactful than watching it at home for 50 minutes, however long the broadcast is. Having said all that, I don't want to completely beat up on at-home worship and online engagement. Because we still have half of our church is still engaging online. I don't know what it's like for you folks, but we've got half our folks back, barely. So there's a lot of our folks who've been online for almost 2 years now. So let me ask all of you a little bit. You've all done online church at some point over the past couple of years. What aspects of that worked for you? When did you find it meaningful? Yeah.
You know, we did something, and Al was a part of it. I don't know, Jim was a part of it. But we did online church, but we did it with 5 or 6 couples at our home, and we invited them, and then we had food, and I think my wife would have been thrilled if we never stopped. We'd still be having church at my house again. But so we had a little, I guess you call hybrid in a sense, but we did not want to lose the relationship or the community at all. You know, that was I wouldn't say we were afraid of it, but that's part of why we go. Now we were all also, what do you think, Al? Was I the youngest at 65 or whatever? I don't know. But I mean, we were all of that age. But then we did have a couple times where someone younger came and they were like, wow, this is cool. They got a big TV, they got like fancy speakers, and the worship's loud, and you know, it was really cool. But
And we worshipped, it wasn't just watching TV.
oh no, we
Did you guys sing?
Yeah.
oh, and then we argued about what you said.
You should have been there.
We had a couple Sundays but then we ate several times. But I mean, in other words, we looked at it and said, yeah, we could watch it, but our phone rang, I think, a week after made the announcement, and somebody said, hey, you want to come to our house? Want to go to your house? Where do you want to do this? Not stop.
Interesting.
And I thought that was again, that was partly our generation, I think,
Right.
you know, but it mattered.
Yeah, interesting. How about some others? What was the experience like doing church online at home?
Terrible.
Was it?
The question I'm thinking, which I'll say for when John says the question, is, but it seemed to have taken us one step further away from the church. And I don't just mean physically. You know, I think of members of my family that I haven't come back. And we're watching it, and then they don't even do that anymore. It was a door to leaving.
Yeah.
It's fractional meaningful. It's just, you know, half of it, if not more than that, is the commitment to being there, but also interacting with the people before and after. And it's an experience as opposed to a TV show. And I found it difficult, although I did it Sunday this week because I had to leave during the middle of it to go to, where'd I go? Oh, Massachusetts somewhere. Shrewsbury. But that was a commitment I couldn't break.
Any positives from the online experience?
It was nice not having to load the kids up.
Yeah.
And do them after church. That was easy.
Yeah.
And like, I like doing that as a family, that we all sat down.
Did you guys do that?
Yeah. So we'd have, the kids would sit through the sermon for the most part, or color or whatever.
Yeah, right.
kind of found the opposite with our kids. They were just running around, we couldn't get them to sit down. The teenagers were like sleeping on the couch, we were trying to watch. And we actually started, when everything happened, we were at a different church. And it was not, we got tired of online. We felt like we were missing something, not being part of the community, really. So we sought out different churches that were meeting, because the one we were attending still was completely online. So that's how we came here and found this church. But yeah, it wasn't working for us at all.
Yeah.
And the kids definitely needed something.
Yeah, they needed something.
Yeah.
Needed some kind of program to get them in, more involved.
Right.
TV just wasn't doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's kind of the way, the challenge I've made to my kids, who are raising my grandchildren, by the way. I love Jesus and love church. So, yeah, the kids get it now. They're mostly little kids, and so they get it. They love Jesus, and they know the songs, and they read them Bible stories at night. But as those kids begin growing up, where are they going to find Christian friends? They go to public schools, most of them, so they're not making a lot of Christian friends there. And suddenly those kids are going to be 13 and 15 and 17, and their parents, my kids, are going to wish they had some Christian friends in their lives, some other Christian young men and women who invest in them in a small group or their Sunday school class or their youth group. And it's not going to happen automatically. Those relationships are built in Sunday school and VBS, and so I get concerned about that for my grandkids. Where are they going to get grounded as they grow up? I think of all the adults who took an interest in me along the way, and I remember all their names. I could give you 100 names of men and women from all walks of life and all ages whose faces and names I still remember, who taught me the Bible and pointed me to Jesus and took me on canoe trips and, taught me to sing in a choir. I just thank the Lord for all those people. And I don't know where those people are in my grandkids' lives, frankly. So I'm worried about them.
It broadens the family. It seems like, I mean, if you look at a successful Christian, how many successful Christians are there behind that successful Christians? And as when we break that chain, it's not always visible. I don't know that we're always thinking about it, because it just happens so naturally in community. But when we break it, something severs that's really important, and the lifeline of faith, in a way, severs.
Yes, I agree. And we need all that. We need that many connections, because kids at a certain point want to get away from their parents. They don't want their parents' influence. They want their own faith. And so to have been influenced by other adults in their lives who are different from their parents, but who love them anyway, that's really important.
There's these metaphors I've been thinking about in Scripture that we don't talk about a lot, but they're communal, and we're so individualistic.
Yeah.
And it's hard to kind of really imagine the impact of what these statements are, but the church is described as the bride of Christ. We aren't described as Bryan isn't the bride of Christ. John isn't the bride of Christ. The church is the bride of Christ. And there's something about that that's
a very relational metaphor.
It is, isn't it? It's like when you come together, you are this thing.
Right.
But not necessarily when you're apart. This could be a little controversial, but you see in Acts where the Apostle Paul has this encounter on the road to Damascus, and he has this vision of Jesus, and Jesus says to him, "Saul, Saul, why are you persecuting me?" But he's not persecuting Jesus. He was persecuting Christians. But Jesus, in that vision, tied himself so tightly with the church that persecuting Jesus was like persecuting the church. And you could flip it around and say loving Jesus is like loving the church. Right. Is there something there, and how do we communicate that?
Absolutely something there, because for people who said, "Hey, I love Jesus, I just don't want to be part of the church," that doesn't compute, because the church is his people. That's his company. Those are his children. And it's like saying, "I love you, but I don't love any of your family." Well, then you don't really love me. This is my family. To love me is to love my family. And so I think that's a non sequitur to say, "I love Jesus, but not the church."
I could see people just reacting to that, though. That doesn't sit well. We don't talk about that kind of thing very much.
But I think that's a real thing.
It seems another casualty of all of this has been life groups. Now, I know Grace has been very strong in life groups and TCA, and John has been emphasizing life groups and study groups. But I think both churches had to basically dissolve that for a period of time. And, that's where I think a lot of relationships are built as well.
I would agree. We had a very interesting experience. We've been in a group for like 15 years. It just kind of fell apart for all kinds of reasons. Not bad, they kind of disintegrated. So we were starting a new group, and I kind of have to carefully pick a group because people can be weird with me. And I don't want to run the group. I just want to be myself. And Karen just wants to be herself. So you got to have people who are comfortable with the pastor in the group. But anyway, we found this nice group of about 5 or 6 couples in the Bedford, Concord area, and said, hey, let's be a group. Let's just get together. So I think we met 2 times in person, and then COVID hit. We met twice in person. So we said, well, we encourage groups, keep meeting online, on Zoom. So we all learned Zoom. That group, I don't know that we missed a session. Maybe we took a break in the summer, but for almost 2 years, hardly anyone ever missed. A, because we desperately needed it. We wanted to connect with people. And B, because you could. Even if you didn't have a babysitter, or the weather was bad, or you were on vacation in Florida, you could still Zoom in. We hardly missed for 2 years. Now, the past 3 months, our group has not met once. I'm traveling, I'm away, I gotta work. We have not met, and right now I'm kind of sitting waiting for someone in the group to say, hello, we haven't met, because I don't want to be that guy to have to say, I said I don't want to be the leader. But everyone's just like this. So I'm not sure what I'm saying. I guess what I'm saying is you can make group life work in both environments. The few times we have gotten together, it's been really fun and deep and rich. But there's something about the Zoom environment that made it really accessible. So.
But maybe on that, as I was speaking, my wife and I came from Grace Chapel 5 years ago, and we are still with the Westford group with that. We decided that she had such a long-term relationship, so we had to continue going on. And we did continue through the whole COVID time on Zoom. Now, as things have been opening up more, where most everyone else is from Massachusetts, they're still fearful, and we're still meeting on Zoom. But
welcome to my world.
Exactly.
It's not New Hampshire.
But there's a few of us that is saying, we gotta see face to face. We're just gonna have a barbecue Saturday night. Whoever wants to come, face mask, whatever, and we do it. Okay. We do. So whoever wants to, you can have your Zoom meeting, for the small group. But yeah, we're gonna have a real thing. We're gonna have a get together.
The question that's really on their mind is when you crossed the border, did you roll down your window and breathe in that free New Hampshire air? That's what they really want.
Well, when you were describing, you guys got together in person, right from the beginning, right?
No. We had arguments about masks.
Okay.
We sat. My wife had me moving couches and chairs and,
But you were in a house together.
But we were in
our group, our house, we wouldn't have done that.
And if we had, what was it, 10, right, was the max?
Yeah, 10 was that, yeah.
Whatever, I mean, when the 11th, you were like an 11th person. We almost had to make me leave, no. But I mean, we were cognizant of and there were not always happy people.
Yeah.
But we wanted relationship. Yeah. We wanted community. Yeah. I was going to ask now the reverse in that you said about your small group. Now that you could meet together, you're not meeting. You must have thought about why this happening. Yeah. I have thoughts too, but why do you?
I think part of it is the distraction factor. We can travel again. We can shop, we can go to restaurants, we can go to our kids' plays or whatever it is. So there's the distraction factor that for a long time wasn't there. You couldn't do anything at the height of COVID. I think some of it is that. And just the convenience. We gotta get dressed. We gotta drive over there. You know, I don't know where that house is, and the Wilkersons have crummy snacks, or whatever. And all those things. Whereas before, you had to do was literally get from the dinner table, sit down, click, you know, turn your thing on, and you're done. And the night goes a lot later when you're in person. You know, when you're on Zoom, right? Things start on time, they end on time. You know, but gotta go. You know, it's 9 o'clock. But when you're in person, it's like you're talking, and you know, so it's a much longer evening. So I think the convenience factor has kicked in. But you have a thought? You have a theory?
Just, I not a theory, but just I wonder if it's that that there's a certain amount of desire for isolation, not just that it just happens, but that people liked it to some degree,
That's interesting.
and that they are. I mean, we experience it in what we do, but that you know there was a certain of, like you say, there's convenience, but there's also a safety, a feeling when it, you know, you're on Zoom, you know, I could be looking at you smiling on that camera, I'd be going to my wife and going,
Not that
or, you know, I mean,
you would. Yeah, that's right.
but I also maybe kind of like just being alone. I mean, I think isolation has become a desire in a lot of people's lives, and that we, and not that we have to break that, but we have to preach and teach and talk in church about how dangerous that isolation is.
Yeah, good. Right.
Because people, I think they like it.
Yeah.
I really do.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Is it keeping you out, or is it, you know, the reverse isolation? Sometimes it's for some, it's like,
Self-inflicted, yeah.
I don't have to be near other people.
Right.
And other times it's I'm protecting myself from whatever. But I wonder, you know, just with the idea, I'm not sure if certain people are born community creators. I feel like I'm a part of that and have been my whole Christian life.
Amen.
And so it's a simple thing to wander into it. But if my wife's not involved, it's more work, because we kind of work like a team, you know? And so I'm just wondering how much of that has been passed on. Because if communities are really high value, then how come there are so many excuses for not participating in community? And has that value been lost, or is it being lost?
It's an interesting thought.
You know, because it's a lot of work. And like
It's a lot of
you said,
work.
you gotta bring my kids, it's easier here.
Right.
Totally get that. But then there's that customary thing that if you don't keep getting together, pretty soon it's like,
Right.
hey, remember those guys? You know.
I know. Well, church is a lot of work. Right? I mean, I don't know about what you guys are experiencing. One of our hardest things right now is getting volunteers back. You can't get volunteers in kids' camp. Oh, every week? I do every week. Now, I have to come to the same service every week. I don't know if I can do that. And we can't get volunteers back because it's a lot of work to do that. But we also know that's where the reward is. When you invest yourself deeply in the lives of a group of people or children or teenagers over a period of time, that does something to your soul and their souls, and there's something fulfilling and rewarding. But you have to, it's work. And people have not had to do that work for 2 years.
So there has to be a value, and there has
That's
to be an
right.
understanding about responsibility.
Right.
But the value part, you know, the value added, that can be fun, or that can be all those things.
Right.
But somewhere that responsibility part, you know, somebody has to light the fire.
Right.
We're all going to get cold.
And I think we got to talk about it, right? I mean, we got to find new ways to talk about it to our kids. Like, this is why community. When's the last time you heard anybody talking to their kids or anybody? This is why we do community. We just do community. We'll talk about why we do community. So what's the reason and the vision, and how did it, and tell stories around it, right? How did it shape you? And I think you're a good example, Al, because of this generation that was very close-knit of families at Christ Church. But you guys have leaned on each other. You've grown together throughout the years. What an amazing model of community. Is that being passed down? You know, How can we do that? How can we show the next
The question I
generation?
have a lot of times is, we've got, 10, 12 people that were kind of a closer group, but there's that primary group thing, that isolation. It's like, well, we don't really have room for more people. And so unless we're willing to split, that whole issue, nobody wants to split.
Very hard to
You're
do,
having
yeah.
community.
Very hard to
But if
do.
you don't split and invite other people in, you don't pass the traditions and those things on. It's like inviting 50 extra people to a wedding. It's got a cost, but you can be a part of something. It's a kick, And so it's fun.
Come back to your original question again. Frame the original question, John.
Is it time to reimagine how we view church attendance?
I think the answer is yes. I do think we have to accept the reality that people are not going to attend the way they used to attend. They're just not. Now, we want to add value and bring them back and teach them and coach them and encourage them and create environments they want to come to. So we surely value attendance. But you've probably heard the expression that engagement is the new attendance. As important as attendance is, what's really important is engagement. That people are engaged, body, mind, soul, and spirit, with a community, with a mission, with a church. So there are a variety of ways to engage people. And physical attendance is sure one of them, and it's a good one. But there are other ways people can engage. They can engage in a Zoom group. They can take a Sunday school class online at home by themselves. They can watch a video together in a small group. They can give online. They can pray in a Zoom prayer meeting. There are other ways to be engaged. They can watch church from vacation at the Cape or the White Mountains, wherever they are, and stay connected in ways they might not have otherwise. So, hey, I'm a pastor. I love great attendance. I count it. Every week of my life, I want to know what's the attendance for 4 years. What's the attendance? And so that matters to me, and I love a room full of people. But we just have to face reality. It's a different kind of a world. How many of you shop online? How many of you shop in stores? Right? The way you shop, the way people go to school, the way they choose restaurants and plan their vacations is the way people are going to do church. They're going to do it online sometimes, and they're going to do it in person sometimes. And they want to move seamlessly from one environment to the other. So when we talk about hybrid church, that's kind of what we're talking about. How can we find multiple ways for people to stay connected? Because one of the beauties of what we learned during COVID and producing good quality digital services is now people really will watch when they're on vacation, or they're homesick, or they have to take their kid to practice in the morning so they can do church in the afternoon. 2 or 3 years ago, people on vacation, I don't know. Did they go back and watch the video later? Who knows? But now people are dialed in. And I think a lot of people will stay with us even when they're not in the building. So.
I think it's probably been asked before, what if? I know we've asked it within our group with all these that now are no longer coming in physically. What if we would say, okay, we're doing it online for 2 more months, and then that's it? What would the thoughts of that be? Do you think we'd get them back, or would they just never come back still?
I don't think you'd get most of them back, frankly. I don't think it's a temptation, and don't think we haven't all thought about it. Every pastor I know has thought about that. Are we shooting ourselves in the foot by putting this stuff out online? But I don't think most of them come back. And the other thing is, a lot of people will now find you online. They'll find us online first before they ever walk in the door. So.
Okay, that's. Well, it's just my daughter's in college, and she spent the summer in Seattle, and she's in college in Rochester, and both times she's previewed churches online before she went to them.
Yeah, I'll guarantee you.
That's how she's shopping for them.
Mm-hmm.
We had an interesting comment from our youngest is a junior in high school. And once COVID started and they started being online, we've been talking to one of his teachers about what that's like. And she said it's better because that generation is so accustomed to watching things on a screen. And it really blew me away, like, oh my God, has that generation moved so close to that screen?
Yeah.
Okay, so, and they are, trust me,
Right, yeah.
17 years old,
Right.
they are that close. But she said literally, like, the kids are so much more attentive on that screen.
It's interesting.
As long as we're providing content. If you give them a minute there.
Yes, right.
Right.
If it's boring, they're gone.
Like they disappear, literally disappear from the screen. But she said they're so much more attentive as long as we're teaching accurately to the screen. She said it's amazing.
It's interesting.
So-
Well, to that
I
point,
think you're fighting that by saying if you can't do it,
You
if
can't
you
do it.
don't want to Zoom or
Right.
we'll make that change. I think the next generation, our generation, the best part of COVID for us was going back to church. We never imagined how great it was going to be to go back in the building and spend 30 minutes afterwards talking to friends and actually being in the building. So, but generationally,
that's exactly right. And I think I've learned as a communicator, I mean, I hated preaching to the camera those first handful of months. I just hated it. It felt horrible. But I've learned now to get my head into a space where I realize I'm talking eyeball to eyeball to a person or a family in their living room, and I'm making nonstop eye contact with them for 30 minutes. That never happens in a big room. They can look around and look at the choir, what's Mrs. McGillicuddy wearing, and look at the kid going to the bathroom again, you know. There's a million things to distract them. If you have good content, it's eyeball to eyeball. It's personal, it's intimate, and I kind of change my style on camera to when I'm, preaching to the crowd. So there's something to that experience. And if I can back up to those three things, transcendence, meaning, and community, when we design our digital experiences, we actually think about how can we provide those three things even digitally. So a big part of transcendence is beauty. Artistic beauty, beautiful music, beautiful settings. If we can provide real beauty in our digital experience, there's something transcendent and healing about that. It taps into something we all long for. We're inspired by beautiful music, a beautiful landscape, beautiful colors. So that's how we look at transcendence. The meaning, of course, is the content. Let's be sure we have a message that's relevant to people's lives, that brings perspective, hope, encouragement, challenge every single week. Don't ever be predictable. Let them feel like if I don't tune in this week, I'm going to miss something. It might be something that makes me mad, but doggone it, they're going to say something on that show, and I want to hear what they're going to have to say. So have some content. And then connection, and I think we need to get better at this to try to build a relationship with the viewers. So that's why the eyeball-to-eyeball thing, that can feel very intimate. And we now have an online campus pastor. Leah Knight Breton's our online campus pastor. She's trying to build relationships with the online people. She texts them during the week. She chats with them during the show. There's a couple small groups for online people. And I'd even like to see our worship leaders more often be personal as they lead worship, even digitally, and try to build a relationship with people. So you're limited, but I think you can do transcendence, connection, and meaning even digitally.
I transcribed sermons for a while for a career, and one of my, a preacher that influenced me early on, it was A.W. Tozer. And I found a sermon of his that must have been buried. It was against television in its entirety. It just stuck with me. I'm like, this is so outdated. Everybody has a TV in their room. Most people probably have more than one TV in their house, and it just stuck with me as feeling like really outdated. And now we're just, it's ubiquitous. At the same time, I remember, I was thinking about this recently, I was on student government in my college when Facebook started to get popular. And I remember, I don't know what power we thought we had, but we thought, oh, we should get Facebook at our college. We need to get Facebook at our college. And now kind of looking back with all that social media has done to our society, it's like, man, I wish we could undo that move of all the benefits that Facebook has brought and social media in general, like what it has done to tear at the fabric of our society. So it's almost like we're living in a moment.
Yeah, we are.
And we don't really know. We're taking risks. We're trying to be wise, but it could cost greatly. The rewards could be great for those who take risks. It's hard. It's
Yeah.
hard to know, isn't it?
Churches all over are trying to figure this out. I was just on a little sabbatical for the month of February, and part of my little time was to kind of check in with a bunch of kind of peer churches, pastors of churches kind of like Grace Chapel. You know, what's going on? What are you doing? Where are you going? What does the future look like? And some of them are going hard over into the digital environment, you know, hiring people, building teams, get better at it, and we're doing some of that, frankly. Others of them are saying, you know what, we're doing everything's sort of shutting down the feed. We're doing everything we can to get people back because we think in person is the way to do it, and they're going hard over in person. And now we're trying to do something in between. So everyone's trying to figure it out right now.
Yeah.
There's a lot of experiment going on.
Personally, in person versus digital, I don't think any of us would argue that we'd rather do in person. But I hear you saying that that's not the future, and I hear the whole discussion is about calling back what we had before COVID. My question was more what we didn't have before COVID. Obviously, in this comment, I'm preaching to a choir because it's Monday night and we're here. But the epidemic of churches for Sundays, faith is for Sundays, and that's when we do that, and then the rest of the week we live in the world, and Sunday we'll talk about God again, and that has been, I guess, forever. I mean, my parents did it, my grandparents did it, churches for Sundays, but that's not a life of faith. Mm-hmm. As we grow in this new direction where we are less connected, because I understand everything you're saying, and it's about necessity, not preference. And I thought what Rick was saying was very interesting, but the next generation wants to be separate. I saw that when cell phones started, teens stopped wanting to make phone calls. It's all texting, so they don't have to do emotional conflict.
Yeah.
How do we grow a community of faith that is a lifestyle and not just a TV program in the new world?
Yeah. So that's where the engagement piece comes in. If they're just watching, that's not engagement. So somehow we got to take those watchers and get them engaged with a group, with giving, with serving, with 2 or 3 other connections during the week. Because one of the beauties of the hybrid environment is that you're no longer limited to a place and a time. 24/7, people can access the content and experiences of our church anytime, anywhere, when they want, where they want. They can access sermons, small groups, whatever. There's something helpful about that. There's something that breaks down that wall of Sundays and the rest of the week. I'm thinking about, last week, last Sunday, a week ago, in the morning I said, hey, you know what? We're all kind of concerned about Ukraine. We're going to do a prayer meeting tonight, 7 o'clock on Zoom. There were like 150 screens on there. That was maybe 300 people praying that night for Ukraine. We never could have done that in the old environment. If we'd said, hey, come back tonight for prayer meeting at 7 o'clock, we'd have had 25 people. Well, it would have been a nicer experience, but, we had 150 households engaged in prayer for Ukraine. Like the drop of a hat. So, again, I'm not arguing. I'd much rather be, I'm glad we're not on Zoom tonight. Not nearly as fun as a garage in New Hampshire. But we got to make it work when we can.
I think you kind of need both. My first experience with a small group was one of your alpha classes when I just started at this church. And it was kind of nice to see people, but you kind of had that.
Was you Alpha online?
I did Alpha online.
Interesting. Okay.
And it was my first experience with a small group. And it was like, doing it from home, but you still had that little bit of a barrier.
Yeah.
But he talked about, his group that he meets with, and it kind of gets you like, oh, I want to go to another group.
Yeah.
So now I volunteer for a lot of stuff, and I actually help teach an alpha class now.
Very cool.
So it gets you involved. I think it brought me into the group.
That's cool. That's the way.
Wouldn't have done that.
That's the way. That's the way we drew it up. That's the way you'd love it to work. Yeah. Thanks for that.
regarding how the church adapts and transforms and, deconstruction and everything that we've been talking about. We went through the last couple of years with the COVID. The whole Zoom technology really hit us at the same time. But then, the 800-pound gorilla that's still out there that I think is worth talking about a little bit is the political fracturing that is so perilous to the church and to the greater community. Within both of our churches, I know there are folks who have felt very strongly in this side of things and folks who felt very strongly on this other side of things. And, I'm thinking, how do we bring the body of Christ back together to be able to support each other among these differences that are just amplified by everything out there in the media in our culture?
Right. I'm glad you raised it, because the environment we've been in, the kind of isolated environment, has made it easier for people to break ties. Click, I'm watching somebody else. That's it. Mm-hmm. If we're together and you have a disagreement or you're mad at something the pastor says, you get them in the lobby and you tell them in the lobby, hey, what are you talking about? If you're at home, you're just mad. You're just mad at your TV, you're mad at your pastor, you got no one to bounce it off of, and you shut it down. You can flip channels in the middle of a sermon if you don't like what you're hearing. So when you're in community with people, when you have to see the person across the way who has a different opinion from you, your kids are in Sunday school together, and now you're standing outside the Sunday school room, and you've got to talk to each other. You've got to figure a way to work it out. You can't just change the channel. So I think you're right, and we all experience that churches just going like this, and some of it's been the political stuff, and it's just been way easier. Instead of saying, you know what, we disagree, but let's figure this out together. I'm committed to you. We're brothers and sisters in Christ. We're going to work it out. It's been easier to say, I'll go on to the next thing.
I think there has to be a commitment to community that's bigger than a commitment to theology, than a commitment to a number of things that are seemingly high values. It's like we'll split over those things, but I think community is probably bigger. It's triunal, It's probably bigger and should be, but I don't think the church looks at that as important anymore. It's much more about being right.
Yeah.
Commitment to community or theology might end up with a cult.
You mean secondary.
And Al has a special announcement to make, actually.
You're looking for a cult leader. I've had many years of developing that gift.
Kool-Aid and Pat.
A question, Brian, we don't do it in church, and I wonder why, but you as a communicator and have studied this art really, by the way you use your hands to make points, someday I have like to learn exactly, because this means everybody and
Grow up in New York with a bunch of Italians. That's exactly how you do it.
Watch The Karate Kid 4 times.
But in the way you mentioned that we're going to be eye to eye with you, when we're watching you on the screen, something we don't do in the church that all other broadcast media does is the tease. In other words, if you're listening to sports radio at 5 minutes of 12, he says, after the hour, we're going to talk about so-and-so, and he's going to be here, so make sure you're back. Or how often do you wait till the end of a TV show to hear what's coming up, what's the the average, and yet in the church, and we are selling to some degree, but we don't run a tease. I mean, if you finished your message and said, hey, I want you here next week because we're going to talk about, the Red Sox, no.
Something like Jesus went in the tomb, but
We're gonna talk.
wait till you hear what happens next week.
But I mean, in other words, I say it to be funny a little bit, but really, we don't do it. And I always wondered why, because you have us.
Right.
And now you have us in a different way when we're at home or when the people, particularly that audience, in the big room, it's different. But when you're talking to those people one-on-one, to be able to say, pick up your pen, this is what we're going to talk about next week, and I'd like you to write this down.
Right.
And then to pound it at them all during the week.
Yeah.
I don't know.
That's a cool idea. I don't know.
I just wonder, but why have we never, it's like is it a rule?
No, it's not a rule. There's probably we don't want to sound like marketers. We don't want to sound like an infomercial or a TV newscast. But the truth is, we're in that business. We're in the business of the endeavor of communicating.
Really?
And capturing and holding people's attention long enough with something that we believe can change their lives and the world for the eternal better.
And you want them next week.
And you want them next week. So sometimes I'll do that in benediction. You guys don't get to hear the benediction. It's not going to say, like, I did last week. If you like the way Jesus came into town on Palm Sunday, you wait till you see what happens on Monday. And so we'll do that sometimes at the end. But yeah, we could do that.
Have you ever heard this one? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it drink. But you can put salt in its oats.
I mean, that's what we're really trying to talk about here, right?
And just what happened with TikTok from one year to the next, going like from say the 7th most popular to the 1st. Did you learn a lot? Have you studied that? Is there application for what they did over, gosh sakes, 1 year with what our attention span went from 12 seconds to 8 seconds. They went to 1 minute only, and they killed it.
I know.
130 million viewers for some 17-year-old girl in Norwalk, Connecticut. You're killing me. What do we learn? I mean,
Well, yeah, we've hired folks who are good at this. We do have some people on our digital team right now who are trained in how do we engage people online? How do we communicate well online? How do we get this word out to more people? And some folks have negative reactions to that. Oh, it just sounds like marketing. Yeah! Call it outreach. You can call it marketing if you want, or you can call it outreach. We're trying to find people who don't know what we have to offer, and we think it's going to make their lives better. So why wouldn't we try to find them where they are with something that might capture their attention? So, yeah, we have folks trying to help us. I'm no good at it. I don't get the world. I don't get that world at all.
I have kind of a pushback to that. A lot of it, we're talking about the younger people. There's a lot of younger people that are fed up with all of that stuff.
That's true.
Big time. There's a reason that people are going to more liturgical churches, if not leaving evangelicalism altogether, because they've seen the smoke machines and they're sick of it. They've seen the, the seeker-sensitive movement was kind of like, well, the desire was good, right? Like the Willow Creek thing, but it's like then you discovered, it's a mile wide and an inch deep. And so I think that the challenge is, I don't disagree with trying to use any method possible to reach people, but we should not be leaving them in that place of the 30-second soundbite, Bible learning, because Jesus' disciples were with him for a long time, and it was that small group, and it was all hours of the day, so it's like, if we're still just like feeding people little sound bites and stuff where we're trying to impress them, how we, market to them, they're still going to be consumers that aren't really part of the kingdom the way that, Jesus would like all of his disciples to be.
Yeah, that's my concern is kind of along those lines where it's like, because my world is marketing, and like, I understand to do this right, it's extremely expensive and it requires a lot of investment. And I think it really depends on the have to offer that parachurch or mega church doesn't offer. And to me, that's like, that is a community. Like that's why, like the reason we're at Christ Church is because I saw the way a lot of the older guys like could debate an issue and still be friends at the end of the night. I was like, yeah, that's what I want. That's what I want my kids to see, and like have some diversity of opinion in there. Yeah, I think that's the thing. It's just like it's so much effort to put something out at that level. Like if you want to be competitive.
Yeah, we can't compete. We definitely can't compete.
Yeah.
But with not a lot of money, but a little bit of expertise, you know, you can bump yourself up on the Google search engines, so your name comes up sooner when people say church near me.
Absolutely.
And
Yeah, absolutely.
We've seen that happen in the past year, just because we've been doing more stuff online and getting out there. And I find more and more people now saying, and when I meet a lot of them, they say it's the first time I say, oh, how did you find out about us? You know, it used to be a friend told me or whatever. Now it's, oh, I watched this, I saw one of your videos, you know, whatever. So, but it's a good caution. It is a good caution that we...
Yeah, from a content standpoint, I think it's, my concern, and I think I mentioned this a few before, is that you get like the Facebook. The problem with Facebook is nobody's talking to their friends anymore, or their family, they're talking to their audience. And I'm afraid that's what happens with churches too. It's like, oh, my global audience, and you lose all that aspect of like sitting down and talking with somebody.
Or if the person in your church that's got a messed up marriage is cast aside because it's more about engaging your online audience or getting a place.
It's good. Good caution. Good caution.
Well, we're kind of wrapping up, but just love a couple more comments or questions from you guys, and I'll let Bryan have the last word.
Speak of outreach, one of the things that I love about this church is how we do reach out to get to the community. They've done Egg Fest, Light Fest, and you know, a couple occasions now of being at Newton Wellesley, extended times for the hospital. Just so happens one of the head nurses is from Amherst. Is that what church you go to? Christ Church. Is that the one? You know, Light Fest? Bingo.
Yeah.
So I think it's great. You know, it's a lot of work for us of making these things happen, but I think the reward is, I don't think we've had all that many that we've had come in from that, but we're getting to be well known and well respected as such.
I thought I was going to say, is that the one something bad? So that's good. That's really good. That's awesome.
He's going to say that to you in private.
Yeah, that one comes after.
In our life group, Wednesday, there's a gym lead, we're studying, and it was talking, the last chapter we read was talking about how we don't spend the time, have the time, make the time to wrestle with the big questions that faith presents us. Not just I would say not just the, how about this, what about the challenges, but really the things that are important to us as in our faith that we need to talk about. And again, I'm old and to do, but where is that space going to be where you go, well, what about my life in faith? What about the fact that I see evil is not punished? What about whatever the questions are? But they're not soundbite questions. They're not meant to be soundbite questions.
Yeah.
They're meant to be lifelong. They're meant to be conversations, the ones that Wookie sees us have. Where we say, this is what I think, and this is what you think, and I don't know where that exists. I'm thrilled that Jim's life group, no one Zooms. We all come every Wednesday. And I've been thrilled by that. But I don't know where that's going to happen as we turn to a media culture.
I think the key is, you want to let the church record and do things media-wise, but you can't stop there. That's one piece of what you need to do. You know, the church is, if you're being excellent in everything you do and you're creating transcendent beauty, you don't just create transcendent beauty and then stop. You got to have that with community. And you can create community in the online world. And just because that's not a good place for you to engage doesn't mean it's not where someone else engages as well.
Right, and that's great as long as it's happening.
Exactly. And so I think that's the challenge for the church, right? Is when the pastor easy. You just do the one thing, you go to Wednesday night service, your Sunday night service. And now it's a little more complicated. So the burden is heavier on church leadership to deliver on that, but it doesn't mean you can't. And it's just, there's multiple avenues that you're responsible to engage with people on.
But is it also finding things that will engage people? You have 150 people come to a person.
Right.
You found a hot button in the church that people responded to. So some of it is, I guess you'd call it content, right?
Yes, right.
Finding the things that do get people into a digital community.
Yeah, and the key then, I think you're kind of hinting at it, is where do you ultimately lead them? So transcendence is nice, beauty is nice, but if it doesn't get into Jesus, if it doesn't get into the gospel, then all we've done is entertainment. And all we've done is create an audience. So ultimately, all these things are, if we don't get into Jesus and the gospel, we have failed. No matter how engaged in it. And that's true whether they attend physically or whether they engage digitally, if they're not getting into those transformative encounters.
If you don't get it, you probably lose it.
Yes.
Because that's what we keep.
Otherwise, yeah.
I can watch something else.
They can watch
on
something
television,
else.
yeah.
They can find other things. Yes,
Last word.
I thought of a last word, the one that just came to my mind just now, really, is Paul, and I not get the words exactly right, in 1 Corinthians. It says, I have become all things to all people, so that by any possible means I might lead them to Christ. I forget the exact word.
Save some.
Save some, yeah. And Haddon Robinson, my preaching prof, used to paraphrase that and say, I will do anything short of sinning to see someone benefit from this. And there's a grittiness to that. And wait a second. But Paul was saying that whatever it takes, that there's a lot of freedom to change, to grow, to do new things. Paul himself was an innovator. He traveled, he planted churches, he sent letters around, and, this was unheard of at the time. But he was an innovator, whatever it takes to get the word out. So, as unsettling as these times are, and sometimes for me as unsatisfying as the environment is, I miss the church environment I grew up in. And I kind of wish we could hold on to more of that. And I want to hold on to what we can, but we're not going to be able to hold on to all of it. But I believe in the genius of the local church, that when Christ established his church, he knew that it could flex and adapt and innovate and reimagine itself to be effective in an ever-changing world and new generations. So let's believe that God's doing that now. We're in the middle of it. We are right in the middle of this reformation, and it's uncomfortable. If you heard me yesterday, the deconstructing and the reconstructing. It's an unsettling process. But the church has always managed to reconstruct on the other side. And let's believe that God can do that again, and we kind of get to be in on it right now. We'll make some mistakes, but we'll learn and grow and figure it out together. It's been really fun.
Thank you for coming on.